Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Many thanks for joining us today on the Journal of Biophilic Design. We're really thrilled to be joined by Dr. Sally Augustin, and this is the first of a series of regular monthly bonus podcasts that we're doing with Sally. Sally and I have founded the Space Doctors. What's the main idea behind the Space Doctors? Because it was obviously your concept.
Well, the main idea behind the Space Doctors is sharing neuroscience findings with people who can utilize these findings in their homes, in their offices, etc., wherever they might find themselves. So, our objective is to help you understand how, color or textures, scents, sounds, it can affect how you live your life, in consideration also of things like, your culture and your personality and all that, because everything, all these different factors come into play to determine if the places in your life support, your goals in the life you want to live or not.
People who have listened to the Journal of Biophilic Design obviously have heard you speak before, but for those of our people who are listening who haven't heard you yet, could you explain maybe a little bit about what you do?
Sure, I'd be happy to explain who I am. I'm an applied environmental psychologist, which means I make recommendations to people based on neuroscience research related to design. So I'll talk with people about what colors on walls can support creative thinking, textures underfoot and why they matter, ceiling heights, how they come into play. But, my work is all based in neuroscience, and my goal is to get this material that's been rigorously derived in labs and field settings, etc., as appropriate, out there into the hands of people who can use it to live better lives.
Fantastic. So it's people like our listeners, basically. Obviously, this month's focus, because each month we have a different focus. We've had color and working from home and things. So this month's one is, this is May 2021, is new season, new home. And we give tips on whether people should stay at home or, and renovate, or what they should look at if they're thinking of moving. Why do you think it's important now more than ever? We've had lockdown and COVID. Why do you think it's important now more than ever for people to really kind of get stuck in and sort of make the home the one they always wanted?
I think, your question, just in the way you've asked it, sort of indicates the, the appropriate answer. We have been locked in our homes for quite a while now. We're used to having access to a whole range of spaces. We might go to a workplace, to work. We can head out, to the movies or wherever for entertainment. We can go out to eat, as long as there's not a pandemic going on. But, and recently, we've had to spend all our time in our homes. So our homes have basically had to be all things to us at all times. We've needed to create a space in our home where we can do our jobs well, where we can mingle with others electronically as opposed to in the flesh as we're used to. We have continuing needs in our home to be able to relax there and revitalize and pursue hobbies or other interests that are important to us. And everything is taking place at home now, not in various specialized areas, around our world.
Mm-hmm. In this issue, I think it's you've created almost a tick list, if you want, for people who are thinking of moving. And it's almost like, well, if I move, what's the benefit of moving? One of the things you mentioned was, if the house that you're in now has got a bad thing, or something that's is driving you nuts, what should what should you be looking out for? I mean, if someone's thinking about moving home, for instance, what sort of tips would you give for the listeners now, if they're sort of like in two minds thinking, you know, I don't know whether to move or not, should I move, should I look for another house, what would you advise them to consider?
Sure, there are some really basic considerations, some really basic questions that you should answer as you're trying to decide whether you want to relocate or not. One of the most important things to think about is whether the people in your home have an opportunity to spend, private time, alone or with others they select in your home. This doesn't mean everybody needs their own room or whatever, but it means there have to be spaces in your home or your garden, etc., where people can exist momentarily without overhearing others, being overheard, seeing others, or being seen by others. And sometimes you can create these spaces just through sort of, rules that you develop for the people living in your home. Like when Susie goes and sits in the chair in the back garden, it's time. It's her private time, her private place. Don't interrupt her there unless it's really important. So you have to have some system, some opportunities for privacy in your home. Also, you have to think about things that are important to you in how you live your life. For example, if you're very committed to living in an environmentally responsible way, and that's not possible in your current home, maybe you want to consider relocating. Environmental responsibility is a complex issue, and it could be that when you think the issue through, even though you want to live in a more environmentally responsible way, and that's a challenge in your current home, it's best for the planet if you change something about your current home as opposed to moving on. Sometimes people need to are driven to relocate because of something about their culture and how that aligns with how they're able to live in their home. And also, you need to think about things that are important to you as an individual in terms of objectives and whether you can achieve them in your home. And to take an example that would never apply to me because I have a terrible singing voice, like if I wanted to be an opera singer and my current home didn't have any opportunities for me to soundproof or whatever, and when I was practicing I was going to be disturbing my neighbors and things like that, well, that might mean it's time for me to move on because I can't pursue a goal that's important to me, this hypothetical singing thing, in the home where I live now. So those are the kinds of things you need to ask yourself. Do people have the fundamental psychological support that they need in the home now? That's what I'm getting at with the privacy. And can you live the life that you wish to live in your current home at a really basic level? And you have to be honest with yourself about whether that's whether you're capable of living the life you wish to live in your home or not.
That's great, Sally. Well, people who are listening, as I said, this is going to be a monthly little bonus we get every month. So for the next issue, we'll have another podcast. So kind of giving people the highlights of what people can learn when they subscribe. It's half price at the moment. So if anybody's listening, go to the spacedoctors.com and they can subscribe there. So, but Sally, many thanks for joining us. And love working with you, by the way. So that's cool.
Well, I enjoy working with you, Ness, and I want to encourage people to travel to the Space Doctors, in particular, to read this issue, because we give you in this edition all sorts of tips prioritized about steps you would want to take to make your current home a better place to live. Like you need to start with sleeping areas first, and then go on to your home office type spaces, etc. And we also talk to you about things you might want to look for, things you need to look for in any new home that you're considering. And a very interesting part of that discussion to many of our readers will be thinking about personality and making sure the personality of the people who will live in a space aligns with new homes that you're considering.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.